overview of the current state of research on infra or infi topological spaces. So this video will be more about bibliography and references than about pure mathematics. Because we would like to summarize the current state of research on infra topological spaces, which are known as infi topological spaces too. We analyze them briefly, or rather we mention all those authors who analyze them in the context of typical Cantorian power set, as well as some alternative environments like fuzzy sets, neutrophotic sets, but also soft sets or intuitionistic fuzzy sets. First, assume that X is a non-empty universe, and we have some family tau of subsets of X, so it's contained in the power set of X, and we say that tau is an infra topology on X if and only if the following conditions are true: that empty set and the whole universe are infra open, so they belong to tau, and that we have closure under finite intersections. So closure under arbitrary or even finite unions is not required, is not necessary here, and the closure under arbitrary intersections is not required too. So these are only these two or three, if you wish, conditions: an empty set, the whole universe, and finite intersections. So this is weaker than the idea of topological space. And this definition was presented under this name in 2015 by Al-Awdari from Yemen in this paper on infra topological spaces. And in this paper, the author defined, as you can see, some basic notions, some obvious notions like interior, closure, exterior, boundary, and so on. And then, mostly in 2016-17, we had some other papers written by Al-Awdari or inspired by his initial work, and we found the following articles in Google. I continuous and I star continuous functions were studied by Al-Awdari. Then we have some authors, mostly from India, who wrote about on generalized regular infra closed sets, Dhanalakshmi and Malini Devi, on infra-generalized B-continuous functions, Vayomati and Nirmala Irudayam, on generalized B-closed sets in infra-topological spaces, of course, Vayomati and Nirmala Irudayam again, on N, perhaps this is a mistake, infra-alpha open sets by Othman and Hanif Page. Infra-alpha open sets. As you can see, these papers are concentrated on the investigation of some so-called weakly open sets, but in infra-topological framework. And moreover, they deal with the notion of continuity, both in the context of typical infra-open sets and also alpha, B, or regular infra-open sets. Then in 2022, I have published my paper on this issue. It's here. It has been published in Communications of Korean Mathematical Society. Infra-topologies revisited, logic and clarification of basic notions. Because my background is logical, so I described how infra-topological spaces can be used as a semantic model for some propositional classical model logics. So if you are interested in neighborhood semantics, topological semantics, crypto frames, forcing of formulas, the notion of truth, then you can check my paper too. And several other issues have been discussed by me, like the notions of pseudo-infra open sets and infra-genuine sets, and also generalized infra-topological space. Chakrabarty and Dasgupta used the notion, the word infra-topological space in this paper, but I couldn't reach this paper. I was able to reach only its preview on ResearchGate, perhaps, but it seems that they assumed to work and this is a quotation, with a per xt where x is an unempty set and T is a family of subsets of x which includes x. If this is their infra topology, then clearly their definition is different than the one presented by Alodari, and it seems that their definition is something like counterpart to Chasar's weak structures. We remember that by the very definition of weak structure is the one that empty set belongs to it, but here it's not the empty set but the whole universe. In 2017, several authors defined infi, not infra, but infi topological space, but their definition seems to be identical with Alodari definition of infra topologies. So again, we have only intersection under finite, closure under finite intersections, and openness of empty set and the whole universe. And these were Das, Kumar Saha, and Bhattacharya, the paper on infi topological spaces published in the Journal of Fuzzy Mathematics in 2017. And they defined some initial notions, of course, interior, closure, continuity, several basic theorems. They investigated some weakly open sets. And they wrote an interesting statement there, namely, let me quote it, the concepts like separation actions, compactness, product infi topological space, connectedness, hyperconnectedness, extremely disconnected space, submaximal spaces may be studied in this context. And undoubtedly they should be, and it seems that the vast majority of these topics has not been covered yet, so there is some place, for example, for you or for me. Among the newest papers on infra or infi topological spaces when studied in the standard Cantorian context of power set of X, we have this one by Christy Jennifer and Kokilavani on infra generalized hash alpha closed sets, and by Othman infra beta closed and open sets. This was published in Pakistan by Punjab University Journal of Mathematics. So again, some subcollections of weakly open sets were studied. Infra topologies were mentioned by Tantawi and Abudonia in their research on B topologies. This is here. They showed that some subcollections of sets may be considered as infra topologies, and surprisingly, this paper has been published already in 2005, and the authors claim that the notion of infra topology has been presented already in 1977 by Hussein in his book Topology and Maps. Also, Al-Zwidi and Al-Hosseini mentioned the notion of infra topology in the same context, that some subspaces or subcollections may be considered as infra. This was this paper. And what is interesting is that there was at least one master thesis on infra topologies defended already by Sugania in 2017 in Karpagam Academy of Higher Education, and as you can see, it was about I and I star continuity and alpha continuity in infra topological spaces. Another line of research, just as I said at the beginning, is to study infraspaces in some alternative contexts, by which we mean, of course, some non-classical collections or classes of sets. If you are interested in fuzzy topological spaces and you would like to know something about fuzzy infi or infra topological spaces, then you have these two papers, normal induced fuzzy topological spaces and some remarks on fuzzy infi topological spaces. The second one was published in Chile in Proyecciones. And of course the authors derived some basic theorems on continuity and connected notions. But there were some other mathematicians who performed similar research, Amin, Al-Shami and Al-Azam and Mendy, a novel fuzzy structure, infra, not infi, but infra fuzzy topological spaces, but we already know that these two terms are identical. And they published their paper in 2022. They discussed homeomorphism, isomorphism, neighborhood systems, and other notions. As for the intuitionistic fuzzy sets, vague sets, yes, we have the following paper, Vague Infra Alpha Open Sets from 2000, 18. Moreover, this is also in the context of alpha, pre, and semi-open sets. As for the nutrosophic sets, you have some papers by Vaiomati and Nirmala Irudayam, like here, new forms of nutrosophic infra open sets in nutrosophic infra topological space and so on, and infra B open set. And then you have recently Das, Pramanik and Chandra Tripathi published nutrosophic infi semi-open set via nutrosophic infi topological spaces, so you can check this. And finally we have soft sets, infra topologies in soft axiomatics in soft context. They've been introduced perhaps by Tarek Al-Shami in 2021 in this paper, New Soft Structure Infra Soft Topological Spaces. Then he discussed the notion of homeomorphism and quotient mappings in this space, and finally he with some co-author he dealt with connectedness and local connectedness on infra soft topological spaces. So there is no separate bibliography in this video because throughout the whole presentation you had all those papers, so you can easily find them in internet. Thank you very much for your attention, and please study infra topologies and other structures.